unless you're recognized to speak. I'm Lynn Geisinger. I am the chair. I will call the roll. First Vice Chair Catlin.
Here.
Second Vice Chair Davidson.
Here.
Secretary Sloan.
Here.
And Treasurer DeSalle is out and excused. I am not yet seeing any other directors in attendance. Staff with us today are GM CEO Deborah Johnson and General Counsel Melanie Snyder, and the team, our Executive Manager Jack Kroll and Tri-Shrey Parrish, and the rest of the board team, Jillian Knapp-Rhodes, and Brandy Hunter. Okay, there's Michael Davies. I'd like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Is there anybody in the queue to speak?
Chair Geisinger, there is no one here indicating a desire to speak, and we received no previously emailed public comments or public comments through any other avenue.
Great. With no participants in the queue, we will now close the public comment period. We have one recommended action this afternoon. As a reminder for the committee, staff, and anyone watching or listening, any action items that are passed by the executive committee, even if the vote is unanimous, will be included on the board agenda under recommended actions, so the full board will have an opportunity to discuss this measure. The action under consideration by the committee is for the 2024 Legislative and Government Relations Program, which is for the Board of Directors to adopt the 2024 Legislative and Government Relations Program. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Director Davidson.
Second, Sloan.
Great. I hear Director Davidson and Sloan as the second. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. Can you please present this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair, member of the committee, Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. This committee has received a presentation on this last month as a discussion item, and bringing this back as a recommended action this month. So I won't go too much into detail, as you've already heard many of the changes that were made, which were very limited from last year's legislative program. Again, just quickly going through what was changed. The only addition was in that state section to simply add supporting zero fare for youth legislation. And so that was the addition, and that's subsection E under the state section. And then in the local section also was to change some wording around from the previous year, having to do with subsection B in the local section, and that's having to do with the sub-regional service councils. And if you all recall, last year it was standing up the sub-regional service councils and implementing them, and this year it is continuing to administer and implement the function of the sub-regional service councils. And with that, I will conclude my remarks and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks so much. Is there any discussion or questions for Mr. Davies? Okay, seeing none. Are there any no votes on this action? All right, with 4 yes votes and 0 no votes and Director DeSalle absent, the motion passes. Next on our item number 4 is the October board meeting agenda review. Is there a motion to move the October board meeting agenda to the board meeting on October 24th?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I hear Director Catlin is the movement and Director Sloan is the second. Is there any discussion or questions about this schedule?
You mean about the agenda there?
I'm sorry?
You had mentioned schedule. I think
Oh,
questions about the agenda.
yeah, thank you. I'm not seeing any, so are there any no votes? All right, with 4 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 1 absence, the motion passes. All right, we have 2 discussion items on the agenda this afternoon. The first item is the monthly government relations report. Again, Michael Davies, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Michael Davies, Government Relations Officer. Have a brief government relations report for you. So starting at the federal level, really the focus is on finding a Speaker of the House, and that's really necessary to process the next continuing resolution and keep government programs funded. Currently, those are funded through November 17th, 2023. So we have a little less than a month before Congress will need to either pass a full year appropriations or omnibus bill, or approve another continuing resolution, which would really fund government programs at FY23 levels. And yeah, so that is really the focus at the federal level. The House T&I committee did hold a hearing on highway trust fund issues, and largely this is something that the House T&I committee and Senate committees of jurisdiction on transportation programs, they often hold these regularly, at least once during a congressional session, and it's a good opportunity to kind of listen in and figure out what Congress is doing with regards to the bulk of the funding that funds transportation programs, and that is really the gas tax that goes into the Highway Trust Fund. And so Congress always holds a hearing on that, and they did that just yesterday. So it's a good opportunity to figure out what Congress is thinking for future funding of transportation programs. That really concludes at the federal level. At the state level, the general manager and board chair participated in the Transportation Legislation Review Committee on Tuesday, October 3rd, covering topics that focused on the Zero Fare for Better Air initial results that came out just from our July period, and then also covered some details with regards to our partnership program. The last time that we'd presented before the TLRC, the announcement hadn't been made on the partnership program, so provided a few more details there. Additionally, RTD's general manager and chief people officer did have a opportunity to present before the TLRC in a smaller group during one of their tours. And that was really focused on RTD's efforts to recruit and retain employees, which is an interest of topic to the committee. And that was well received, and I think provided a lot of good information to the committee on the robust programs that we have on that topic. And really then moving on the local level, again, RTD is actively working to build relationships, maintain relationships, and keep our local government partners informed. And to that end, RTD's GM did participate with the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners on Tuesday, September 26th. And those topics really included an update on the Northwest Rail Peak Service Feasibility Study, coordination with the Front Range Passenger Rail, people power, sub-regional service councils, and funding awards related to the Call for Projects Partnership Program, and received some good feedback from the Northwest mayors and commissioners regarding the sub-regional service councils and that first implementation of the Call for Projects Partnership Program. So with that concludes my remarks, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question, Director Catlin? Looks like
Well,
you.
I'm not sure if Michael's the right person, but is there an update on the discussions with Lutheran Hospital?
I can respond to that.
Okay. You can, did you say?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Catlin. As you may know, Mayor Starker did write a letter to Director Sloan on this topic, and I am working with staff as well as our general manager to craft a response to that for Director Sloan to consider. Outside of that, we are working with staff and plan to reach out and set up a meeting to basically discuss the request on that. But that is basically where that process is at this moment.
Thank you very much. And another question, I know there's been some dialogue with Director Sloan and to some extent me and then our GM CEO Johnson with regard to working with Jefferson County School District. And just was wondering if there's an update on that.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Of course.
Yes, thank you very kindly, Madam Chair, and for the question, Director Catlin. So Director Sloan copied me on an email transmittal that was sent inquiring about staff's interest in coordinating with Jefferson County. We had not been made aware of that. As I indicated in my email response, the Chief Communications Officer, Stuart Summers, reached out immediately on Monday and scheduled a meeting with the appropriate individual that was referenced in the email. I can't say what date that meeting is taking place, but as indicated, we were very responsive when that was brought to our attention on Friday and immediately proceeded with contact on Monday, and that there is a meeting that is pending.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Any other questions? Michael, you and I talked about this. I don't think it's come to the board fully, but the TLRC has drafted and approved a bill to submit that would provide funding for the zero fare, probably 1 month, and for the youth fair, right?
Yes, that is correct. The TLRC, as I reported last month, they were considering a slate of 10 bills. They are allowed to advance 5 bills for early drafting consideration and to basically be prepared before the legislative session begins in January. One of those 5 bills really took 2 bills out of the 10 that were originally being considered, combined them into 1 bill, and move that through as the 5. Included in that 1 bill is funding for a continued ozone season transit grant program, which is the grant program administered through the Energy Office that funds Zero Fare for Better Air. And then building on to the ozone season transit grant program was the addition of a Zero Fare for Youth grant program statewide for agencies that are interested to apply and essentially either continue or create a Zero Fare for Youth program at their own agency. And so both of those were a part of the one of the bills that was approved by TLRC. Also included in that bill was a concept for CDOT to do some research and convene a panel on the viability and implementation of a statewide transit pass that was really supported by Senator Priola. And then Representative Dixon also added a piece into that wanted to look at personal income tax credits related to expenses on transit passes. And so that's all wrapped into now 1 bill that was approved by TLRC.
Great, thanks. And just, it's not in the list here, but in the agenda here, but we do have both Jennifer Brandeberry and Jen Webster, our state and local PR, public relations lobbyists, coming to the board meeting, reporting in external entities on Tuesday night. So people can see them. It's been a little while. Thank you very much, Michael. That's great. Next item is the 2024 meeting calendar. I've got a couple. I just talked with Jack Kroll about a couple things, and one of them is there are a couple of holidays that we traditionally don't meet right after. Martin Luther King Day is the 15th. We have a Finance and Planning Committee meeting on the 16th and an Operations and Safety Committee on the 17th. And then Memorial Day is the 27th. We moved the board meeting from that Tuesday to the Wednesday, the 29th. You know, I don't feel strongly on whether we should move these. Traditionally, we didn't meet the week of a holiday like that. Memorial Day, since it's kind of kicking off summer, you know, would have I think, a bit more of a risk that people would be traveling and, you know, not able to make a meeting. Are people okay with the schedule as it is? Should we think about moving the Memorial Day? It would probably mean moving the finance and planning and the safety and operations and safety committees a week earlier, and then moving the executive committee and board meetings a week earlier too. And I just looked at this, so I haven't even checked it out with Ms. Johnson or any others, staff side, but any thoughts? Are you okay moving the board meeting to Wednesday after Memorial Day? Think just leave it as it is. Peggy?
I would be supportive of moving it.
Okay. Think we get better turnout.
Yeah, I do.
Anybody else? Thoughts? Yeah, Ms. Johnson.
So, Madam Chair, thank you. I appreciate you all identifying the holiday conflict. I will share that this meeting was circulated amongst members of the leadership team, and there was consensus around this. So I could say, you know, it could be moved, but I don't know what staff's availability is as it relates to those leadership team members that support committees and or, you know, the board endeavors. So I just provide that as a backdrop, recognizing that we have not had the opportunity to evaluate this, only the schedule that was previously done. Thanks.
Okay, I don't think there's, you know, such a rush. If we decided to, I mean, what we could do is just have you run it past by the executive committee, the leadership team. And then, you know, I can work with Jack to see how do others feel. Jack, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna suggest exactly what you said. You know, if the GM CEO wants to huddle with her team and get back to the board office, and if they're good, we can pull it forward. And if there's issues, we'll let you know.
Okay, any other thoughts? No way. Okay, maybe we'll do that then. It's just looking at that one meeting. Again, it's Martin Luther King Day. It seems like everybody's back from holidays around then, so it doesn't seem like quite as big an issue if unless others disagree. All right. Then we will run through that and then publish the 2024 meeting dates. In other matters, I want to kind of go through what we did last night. But first, are there, Deborah, you have your hand up still? Okay. Does anyone else have other matters? Yeah, Marjorie. You're muted.
As usual. I have something that relates to what we talked about last night, so maybe it'd be more appropriate after you spoke.
You know what? I left my little sheet from last night downstairs, so y'all excuse me for just a minute and I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I went to talk this through with Jack this morning, and so just wanted to go through what I was hearing and how we move these forward. The proposal for informal meetings for 3 or more directors seemed to me like it had the support of 10 directors. So my recommendation is to move that forward in November, and it would be coming to the executive committee and then going to the board in the November meeting as a recommended action. And we talked about how we're trying to bring things forward as discussion items, but since we have discussed this a lot, I think we will bring that forward as a recommended action. I'll just run through these and then ask for suggestions or comments if that's okay. Second one is the length of the meeting time, there did seem to be a couple of people, not thumbs up on that one, but I still get the sense that we were pretty much there in terms of making the bylaw change. So again, my suggestion is that we move that forward to the executive committee and the board. And both of those are bylaw changes. So the 10-day notice requirement would be met by getting the executive committee notice out. And Jack and I talked about having a special note in the email when it goes out from the board office that points out that this is publishing these two items is meeting the 10-day notice requirement for considering the bylaw. So that was also come forward as a recommended action in the November board meeting. The committees, the process for developing annual committee work plans and the smaller committees. The annual committee plans is not something we might want to put into the bylaws. We need to get something drafted and bring it back to the executive committee next month, I think is what we said, right, Jack? Yeah. The smaller committees, I don't know that we need to do anything on that. I don't think we do. People liked it. We want to continue it long term. Setting certain committee appointments for 2 years. It seems like the next step on that one is to draft an item for discussion. It was kind of just throwing the idea out. So the board office has offered to draft something that we can look over and move that in for discussion with the board. Respecting staff work plans and time, that is an ongoing issue and something that, as I said in the meeting, I think Deborah and Jack and John McKay and I have been working on. If others have ideas, they're welcome. I think it was a good conversation that we had. Expectations around virtual attendance. We'll draft a long-term recommended action that would certainly make the 2022 motion, or I guess it was 2023, that kept our board meetings in person and and virtual the same as it is for 2023. We'll just make that the long-term process. And I don't think we talked about, I don't know that we need to keep that like in the as a bylaw change, just recommended action. We'll move that forward. Jack will also send out, or the board will also send out a reminder that November 13th is an important in-person meeting, and probably best to send out, a reminder on the performance committee meeting or meetings in December as well. Then creating a plan to help others recruit board members. I suggest that I think that really would help to have a plan. I don't know I know the legislature, there's lots of talk, they may change our board, but in the meanwhile, until we see if anything happens there, I think it makes sense to come up with a plan for starting with those 3 areas. And then if other board members decide they're not moving, not going to run again, we would expand it. But I think Jen Webster is a good source there. And Michael Davies might be a conversation you'd be helpful with. But to have a plan that maybe have a 1-pager that talks about what the job is, and get either the current directors in those 3 areas that are term limited, Broome, Tisdale, and Williams, to be going out. We could create a list of groups that might help us recruit, and put out what sorts of skills we'd be looking for. So I guess my suggestion is we pull together a meeting and try to put together a plan. I don't think it's a huge amount of work, and run it past our senior staff and the executive committee, and go from there. Does that sound okay? All right, Dr. Davidson.
Yeah, all that sounds good. Just starting from that last one first on the recruiting new board members and putting together a list of expertise. I do wonder if, and perhaps we could run this through the board office, or we can do this here. It might be good for us to draft up some of the type of skill sets we'd be looking for. And actually that 2010 audit that had highlighted the need for expertise, or the lack of dedicated expertise, might be a good place for us to look. But it might be good for the board, or at least, for this committee to put together what we believe that list is to bring forward to the board. I know I've had some discussion with General Manager and CEO Johnson on this, and with you, Madam Chair, and some others. But, just looking at the list next to me right now, which is still very much draft, I mean, we have public finance, audit, executive leadership experience, potentially operational leadership experience, government relations, policy, transportation policy, legal experience, or regulatory compliance specifically is something that the General Manager had brought up. Representation of public interest and direct customer experience / advocacy. I think corporate governance, public board expertise. I think there's a list that there's probably, those are too many things, and those are in draft. But it might be good for at least for us to dialogue with an executive committee to put together what that list might be, have the board, align around what we believe that might be. Perhaps even our, legislative counterparts that are looking at board governance and long-term structure can, be listening as we discuss that. So just a recommendation that this committee discuss that. You mentioned, Madam Chair, that the board office, Mr. Kroll, and was going to start working on what a plan might look like. And I'm curious to learn more about that. Maybe we talk about that here, maybe we don't, but I would love for a list that we agree on to be part of that plan.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I've had this conversation with several people, and with Ms. Johnson and others, I think that we can put together a good list, and I think it can go into a one pager with a little more about what the job, is as well. I know that Director Williams has asked for that as she's starting to talk to people. And so I think that's a good suggestion. Maybe what we'll do is try to draft up a one pager and a plan. And if you or others want to send what you see as those areas of expertise, we'll put that in, and we can discuss it next month, if that sounds good.
That sounds good. I'll send that to you and copy in the board office, and just what I've done here, and certainly encourage others to do so. And I think you said last night the importance of understanding what problem we're trying to solve. I think whether there's outside the legislature looking at long-term board governance, or whether it's ourselves looking at changes to our governance, we would do well to align around those problems. And so I guess just to clarify, that particular problem is the one that I think is both felt and then has been noted in, I believe, multiple Office of State Auditor reports, which is the lack of consistent expertise. And so if we have a process, an internal process, given that we have the structure we have for recruiting for that, I think that's the problem. I guess just to align around your stating that last night that I'm looking to solve there is agreeing on that. So I'll send what I've got written down, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to Ms. Johnson real quick, and then back to Vice Chair Catlin and Secretary Sloan.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Prior to opening this up for discussion, you made reference to a meeting, and then you stated senior staff. And I wanted to know what qualifies senior staff, because I'm not certain to whom you're referencing that would be part of this discussion.
Well, I was going to leave that to you. Certainly, I think it would be good to have you in the discussion if that works, and whoever you.
No, that's fine. I just don't use that as an identifier, so I didn't know what you meant.
I had something in mind. I don't. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And then I just wanted to note some word usage. As we talked about the roles on the board, oftentimes people had said jobs. And I think that's where we get the blurring of lines, because basically this is an elected position for all intents and purposes and not a job. And when we make reference to expertise, really and truly, I mean, somebody on the board necessarily would not have expertise. They would have knowledge of and experience in, but when you talk about expertise, that's basically honed over a period of time. And so recognizing that somebody who's has expertise in utilizing the system, I wouldn't necessarily qualify that as expertise. And so as we go through this process, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say, let's be deliberate in our word choice, because while it's important to know about regulatory compliance, I would doubt that we would be able to find somebody to fill the position of a board member that has expertise in that area, unless there was somebody working in a certain capacity, you know, doing rulemaking and things of the like that would effectuate certain rules and regulations to which we'd have to adhere. And so I just use that as an example, not to be critical, but I think it's very, very important as we try to create a framework. We're looking for certain attributes and areas of experience that could be leveraged as we go forward, as opposed to expertise. Because while I'm in this role, I don't pride myself on having expertise in certain areas. However, I pride myself on being knowledgeable and having experience in. So I think it's very important that we make that distinction as we go down this path and try to create some kind of framework which may be able to help us identify optimal people to fill the positions of members of the board of directors. Thank you.
Very well taken. Thank you. I think we look at knowledge and experience, and I know that you have thought about some of those areas too. So if you will contribute those, what I'd like to do maybe is start off with some sort of rough draft idea and then pull together a meeting with really any of us that want to be in it, but certainly you, Deborah, and Jack and I, and so Director Catlin.
Thank you. Actually, General Manager CEO Johnson captured my thoughts as well, because it will be very difficult to find candidates for an elected position that have expertise in one or more of those areas, but having familiarity, knowledge, and experiences, I agree, completely important. On another note, in the past, we had relied on the Transit Alliance to help in recruiting potential board candidates, and they have dissolved. And I believe that their work has been kind of consumed or subsumed maybe by DRCOG and their Leadership Academy. So I don't know if we want to maybe have a dialogue with Doug Rex just to see how they could be helpful as we look to recruit qualified or in quality candidates. That's one thought. Another thought that I had that's completely separate is I think in those 3 districts that you outlined, it might be helpful to have each of those directors host a town hall, and we could support them in that and try and get people interested in coming to just learn what the board is about and who's on it, and some of the goals and our strategic goals and how we want people to support that. I just think that that might be a way to engage the community. Just a thought.
Yeah, those are all very good thoughts. And I think ones we'll also want to follow up on. And in terms of what Transit Alliance used to do, that would sort of be a second level, is can we find someone who would kind of do some vetting? And maybe that's, well, I know that when I first ran, Dr. Mack, Kate's old group, did some forums where all the candidates answered questions. That kind of fell apart, I think, during the pandemic, but some group or groups that would want to weigh in and do some forums or some vetting or something like that, I think is a good idea.
If I might follow up.
Yeah.
So when I was appointed to fill a vacancy, and Director Davidson was also appointed to fill a vacancy, the Transit Alliance approached me about applying. But there was a pretty detailed application process through the county that I had to go through. And I'm sure Director Davidson did too, but I don't know if I can find that correspondence, but some of the attributes that the commissioners were seeking might be something that we could include in Director Davidson's initial pass at these qualifications.
Great. Yeah, if it's something you can find, that'd be great. All right. Director Sloan.
Sure, unless you want to take Jack first, who
Sure.
might, no, okay. This has to do with a discussion last night that I thought was really helpful, concerning communications between the board and staff, relaying issues, and then what happens next? How are the responses going to be updated and tracked? And I'm really hopeful, that we're going to get a good process. This has to do with a sub issue of concerns that relate to the same process. And that is the board's involvement on an issue that relates to staff's planning and budgeting process. How is that handled? And I think some of you know, I'm talking about, I was with a group and we were concerned with minimal signage for the end of the line Ward Road station for the G line from Ward Road itself. It would, and that is yet another concern of constituents, but it also is much more related to staff's capital improvement budgeting process. How can board members who are aware of such a need insert themselves or their issue into that process?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because I had it at the same time, and I assume we'll get Ms. Johnson, but it did seem like with the answers that were coming back there should be a way, and I think somebody got back to you and said they were looking at it, but a way for the board to have some, to be able to bring something forward, and it wasn't clear to me. I think we might want to have Ms. Johnson answer this. Jack, did you have something on that, or? Okay.
And I would not only bring something forward, but understand how it's progressing through the process.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
Thank you very much, Director Sloan, for your question and providing that very clear example. I would say that it sends back to the discussion that ensued last night about the agency response. When this was brought to my attention and I read through the thread, it appears as if we had an individual within the organization that wanted to be responsive, and somebody within a lower level of the organization took it upon themselves to be very responsive and forthright and own the issue that was brought to their attention and reach out to somebody else in a similar level position at another organization. Well, recognizing staffing requirements and resources and the like, and additional correspondence that happened with the State Department of Transportation per se, that there was a lot more that was involved in mitigating this issue that appears to be very, I would say, low-hanging fruit, for a lack of a better phrase that comes to mind. So recognizing that we have to create a process whereby there's an understanding of how this should have happened. It gets back to the operational, administrative, and then the policy aspect that I said we need to carve out. So that's one facet that needs to be addressed that we're going to work towards to mitigate. Secondly, as it relates to where we are, from a budgetary process, I believe this will help in the sense of crafting committee work plans, because when we're talking about doing something outside of what we have established, recognizing we have 3 initiatives that we as a staff are working on that spawn from our strategic priorities, where it may seem simple to say, hey, we want to put a sign here to help people to get to our station. There's a lot of different elements that are involved, including intergovernmental agency agreements. And while the monetary price may be low, we still have to factor that in and what's been allocated, and that comes to the board's attention. That's a long-winded way of saying that I believe succinctly that the board can have a say in what they want to do, but should be included in said budget process relative to where we are with the initiatives that we have outlined for the forthcoming year, and can identify a line item that may be able to address this. Because right now we'll have to drop something to do something else to ensure this comes to fruition and pull somebody off of something just because of where we are with our staffing, but more importantly, with the priorities that we have holistically that we really are behind on. So work to be done, Director Sloan, and I recognize the frustration that can ensue. And there were mixed messages as I look, and I'm Monday morning quarterbacking this because it went to a certain group of individuals that basically make signs and don't implement policy that's been set. And so then we had to have somebody higher in the organization come back and say, time out, we were told by CDOT we can't do this. So I hope that provides some insight. It seems as if I'm talking in circles. That's not my intent, but this is sort of one of those issues that really panned out as we talk about the need for a comprehensive and consistent and succinct agency response, because I believe that could have been mitigated if in fact we had the right people addressing it from the outset, that probably could have been shored up in a much more expeditious fashion. Thank you.
So I'm going to go back to Marjorie and to Jack both, but it's a good example of how frustrating finding an approach is, because it seemed like a tiny request that shouldn't necessarily have to go to you, Deborah. You know, what I was hearing last night is, you know, that policy questions and you know, electeds questions and some of those things come to you. And this one kind of, it grew up, and then even when it went to a higher level in the agency, that's when it raised a policy question, which was the answer to Marjorie's question came back as, we can't do this, rather than this is probably not something we can do this year, but this is how you could get this in line. And that's really the answer I think that we're looking for, I think, for as board members. I'm going to go back to Ms. Johnson real quick, and then Marjorie, you took your hand back down, but
yeah, and thank you so much, Chair Geisinger, and thank you, Director Sloan. I don't disagree with you. What I will say, and please, I want to preface my comments by saying I am not one to throw anybody under the bus, and I shouldn't use that analogy because that's horrific. When somebody is thrown under a bus and the glove is horrible. So let me say that I am supportive of staff, but I want to qualify that we do have some folks working in acting capacities and may not approach it in the same matter of being more strategic and getting to yes, whereas I believe the response was more tactical. Whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, that's something for me to work on as we cultivate and understand how we can coalesce around an issue and get to yes. And I say that, case in point, Director Sloan and I had an instance whereby she was working through different channels, and we do have some legacy employees where it's always, no, we can't do this, as opposed to stepping back and figuring out what we can do, because people are overworked and may not approach it in from the same vantage point. So I would just say, that's something that I will take on, because we need to explain the parameters and not be that agency of no, because to the point that you raised, Madam Chair, there's a way about going
right
towards solutions. And I think that was a missed opportunity, and I'll leave it there because I have talked with both of you, and generally, you know, it shouldn't have to be, it has to come to my office and then we can figure it out, but it's cultural. And we're trying to work through that. And that's what I'll end my comments on. So thank you both for broaching that. And in these instances, I will say that these are the times that it can come to my attention. And if I have to lean in, that's what it's about, to provide that support and guidance. And there are some instances in which that could have been done. And I just think this was an unfortunate circumstance relative to we can't do that, but more specifically, there was something that had been codified more or less, for lack of a better term, working with CDOT about the signage, from what I understand. And somebody didn't know that because they were in a different level in the organization. And as I said, their responsibility is to make signs.
Yeah.
Very
No,
important
but
job, but
I'll just reiterate something that I think both Marjorie and I said last night, which is we are in a sea change from where we were with the non-GMR reports. So at least we're discussing how the process is, that message gets back to people. And, you know, I know that you are working with staff to get us to yes, even if it's delay. So I'm going to give Marjorie the next chance, and back finally to you, Jack. I'm trying to get there.
Right. This would be that, I mean, that example was kind of a hot mess. And I'm thinking if we do have a system and get regular updates, it would really resolve, you know, a lot of these isolated incidents.
Great. All right, Mr. Kroll.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention two things. You had mentioned earlier, Chair Geisinger, about getting a reminder out to board members about December dates. In checking with our staff, and since we have the GM and CEO and Director Davidson and yourself here who are sort of mapping out this timeline, we only have, this is just a reminder, no conversation needs to ensue on this. We only have a December 4th Performance Committee date calendar for December. We still would need to calendar a full board meeting. So I'm just putting that out there for others to discuss, and we can set that date once everyone is on the same page. And then of course remind folks. And then the second piece, but I see GM CEO Johnson has unmuted. Did you want to address that real quick?
I did, Mr. Cole. Thank you very kindly, Madam Chair, if I may. So when we had that conversation, the intent behind that, of course, there'd be a performance committee, but then there would be a special board meeting. And when the discussion ensued, and I see Director Davidson, Chair Davidson of the performance committee, our intent was to then have the special board meeting the same day. So that was the intent there.
I'm glad you raised this because I didn't have that on my calendar. I had the performance committee at 8:30 in the morning on the 4th. So would we combine the two? Did you have a plan on that either?
Yeah, that we would have the discussion in performance committee, and then it would carry over into a special board meeting because the board would have to act. And that's what we did in previous years. Not saying that's the right thing, but for all intents and purposes, that's what took place last year as we looked to minimize schedules or maximize schedules, I should say, and minimize the number of meetings. That was the intent. So perhaps something got lost in translation, but that was always the intent when we put together that timeline that was presented on October, I believe, 3rd or whatever the meeting was where we went through that. That was the intent there. If you go back and look, there was a special board meeting the same day.
So was the board, should both of those be at 5:30? I've got the performance committee in my calendar at 8:30. That may just be my problem, but.
Yeah, and it could have been calendared that way as we mapped it out, but we could, if we want to do it that way. I'm just saying the intent was to have it on the same day.
Okay.
As we did previously with, you know, there was a committee and then you all had a special board meeting to take action.
So 1 in the morning, 1 at night, possibly, or.
Possibly, I'll leave that to people to determine schedules. I mean, if we want to change the time of the meeting so we can go into one into another, I'm totally amenable to that. But what I'm saying is when these meetings were calendared for performance committee, the time slot was 8:30, but recognizing that there could be flexibility, no different from on November 13th, where we're having the performance committee and it's at 5:30. I'm saying I'm amenable to either way, but basically, you know, the same day, that was the intent. So we wouldn't have to calendar an additional meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Eric, did you have something on that?
Yeah, just you know, apologies if anything was lost in translation from me on this. That just wanted to confirm that was the intent, was to do a special board meeting immediately following that. You know, now that as we're discussing this, I do believe that last year's special board meeting took place in the evening on December 6th. But I'll go back and check on that, and I'll take an action to work with the board office and Mr. Kroll. We can work together on what notifications need to go out and how we calendar that. But the intent would be to have the performance committee followed by a special board meeting And I'll go back and take a look at last year's flow, and we can work together on how to get attendance there.
And if they're going to be together, I guess I'm wondering if moving it to the 5th, which is our normal meeting night, makes more sense, but I'll leave it to y'all to look at. Is that not good, Deborah? I don't care. I'm just, people sort of think Tuesday nights, but it's okay. All right. Back to you, Jack.
Okay, great. Well, I'll make sure we follow up, Director Davidson and the GM and CEO appropriately, and we can get that sorted and appropriate notice given, and then we will tell them once, tell them again, and tell them a third time to make sure everyone knows when those meetings are. My last point is just a point of emphasis as word choice matters when we discuss, this process for raising awareness around the board and elections. I think we really need to couch our conversation around this idea that we are providing information to promote candidates to run. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the extent of our role in the board office. We don't want to get in too deep into sort of encouraging some people and not others, or doing any kind of vetting. That just want to make sure we're clear about that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Ms. Johnson and Ms. Snyder. I'd like to see if there's a way to find some group or groups that would do some vetting, and it may be, that we're just encouraging anybody that wants to, but let's see. I think Ms. Johnson and then Ms. Snyder.
Yes, thank you very kindly. This is going back to the Performance Committee and Special Board meeting. I looked, December 5th isn't a problem. December 3rd, we had just agreed on that first Monday, so I just wanted to qualify that. And I'm sure General Counsel Snyder would speak to this, and I support Mr. Kroll's comments. We do have to be careful in reference to how we're qualifying what it is that we're doing. You all are an elected body and don't have any auspices over who can run as a candidate, recognizing that's one of the issues that I personally see, recognizing there's no eligibility criteria and things of the like. So as we identify individuals, that does not give them a one-up per se, because in the event of being fully transparent, there is one individual, for instance, that is running now and I use that term loosely, who has reached out to my office several times wanting a meeting and so forth, right? And I meet with members of the public, and that's just what it is. It's qualifying it as a meeting of, with a public individual that may be interested in public transport. So I'll yield the floor to General Counsel Snyder. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I agree, and want to hear from Ms. Snyder. I think we are encouraging groups in the community to look around to encourage people to run and potentially do some vetting along the way, but we're not doing it. All right, Melanie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so just to reiterate, I think it makes sense to do some of this outreach and provide information about what it means to be a director, the qualities that would be useful to be a director. I think all of that is really appropriate and good. As Mr. Kroll pointed out, as we get closer to when candidates might be announcing, we really need to be very careful about running afoul of the Fair Campaign Practices Act. We can't use any staff resources or time to either support or oppose any candidates. And so as we get closer to that time period, we'll just want to be really careful about how we're communicating and the extent to which we're sharing this information. So I just would encourage you to think about it in terms of outreach and providing information, but not leaning toward vetting people or, identifying particular candidates.
Great. Dr. Davidson.
Yeah, thank you. This is an important point, and thanks, Mr. Cole, for raising it. So I guess I just want to make sure that this would be with General Counsel Snyder. Part of my thinking on putting forward the types of skills that would be helpful or experience, and thank you, General Manager Johnson, an important distinction between expertise and experience. The type of experience that would be helpful for the sake of the public, for the sake of this board. I would think it would be appropriate for us to speak about that generally, which is where I think it might be useful for the board to take a position on what that list may be, and then not be involved in the individual level And probably the sooner that we do that prior to an election starting, so to speak, the better. But I guess I just want to check in because this is an important nuance. If General Counsel, you want to elaborate any further on that, if that's a proper characterization, if you'd have any more details or thoughts or advice to that.
Thank you, Director Davidson. I think that's exactly right, the way you described it. Providing the information about what it means to be a director, providing information about what knowledge, skills, and abilities might be useful to somebody who to be a director, but not focusing on individual potential candidates.
Great.
Thank you.
Marjorie.
And I would just like to take this opportunity to get legal advice. And that is concerning an individual board member, however, can endorse and support a candidate for a position on the board. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And, you know, since this is a public meeting, I think what I'll do, there is a memo that we had circulated to the board previously that provides a little bit more detail around that. So I think what I'll do is update that and send that around so that you'll all have that information at your fingertips.
That'd be great. Be great. Okay, well, I think there's a lot of direction for moving this forward, and I think we'll try to move this forward pretty quickly. Anybody that would like to be involved with this process, I think Mr. Kroll will be helping pull it all together, but do let me know if you'd like to help with putting together the plan and one pager, and then we'll bring it to everybody here. And then ultimately, it's a good idea, Eric, to take, you know, sort of the list and the one pager or whatever to the board and keep everybody in the loop, get their blessing. All right. All right. I don't think, are there any other matters? I think that's where we are here. All right. The next executive committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 16th. Seeing no other discussion, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.